The first part of The Sandman Season 2 gave us a pleasure we'd been awaiting since 2022, a proper meeting between all the members of the Endless. All of the members of the Endless minus Destruction, who's been missing since Season 1, but we meet him too in this part, and that got us thinking that while many will love the aesthetic and acting of the Endless, particularly Desire, not many will know exactly who they are, why they exist, or even how they can be killed. Because, believe it or not, it is possible to kill an abstract concept, you just need the right withered old crone to snap their life thread. But enough tiptoeing around the issue, you guys have seen the title of this video, so now let's dive into the content. This is every Endless from the Sandman franchise explained. And spoiler alert if you haven't seen the show yet, because there will be a few of those coming your way. Before we get too deep into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Leave this place. Return to your realm.
Destiny. The Endless aren't gods. They're not mortals. They are more than both of those concepts. They're manifestations of the words associated, so to the multiverse, they exist regardless of the path a mortal decides to take. Each of the Endless is born to two of the formative forces in existence. Their parents are Night, the eternal embodiment of the endless darkness that predates the universe, and Time, the dimension of existence that drives things forward and backwards. When the first mortal came into the light of life, it wondered what its purpose was, and that wondering led to the coupling of these primordial forces and birthed Destiny, the eldest of the Endless. As for why Destiny is the eldest, well, just think about it. If you were the first living sentient creature in the universe, what would you think of first? Your purpose in life or your demise? If you said the latter, then you're living in a really dark universe, my friend, because most people look for their destinies before they understand death. As the eldest, Destiny is a big brother figure to all his siblings, but he's also the eldest sibling that takes his job way too seriously. He seems to have only two emotions within him, intensity and anger. Destiny's book is aptly called the Book of Destiny, and it, in a way, represents the past, present, and future of the Omniverse. There's nothing that's hidden from his book, and it's chained to his right hand as a representation of the idea that no one can escape their destiny. Destiny himself is rarely featured in his book because his primary reason for existing is to serve as an observer. Destiny bears witness to everything there was, is, and will be from his domain within the Garden of Forking Ways. The garden is an elaborate maze that leads anyone who enters it to exactly where they need to be. Destiny's palace lies at its center. He usually never leaves his garden except for when he needs to attend a family event, like Orpheus's wedding. At the beginning of Sandman's second season, Destiny called a family meeting because he just wanted to talk to his siblings, but as it turns out, that talk was about Dream triggering a sequence of events that will eventually lead to something called the Final War. Though Destiny strives to never sway from the path laid out in his book, there are moments where he expresses genuine emotions. In the graphic novels, he mourned the death of his sibling Despair because, believe it or not, the Despair we see in the show is supposed to be the new one. And another time, an imaginary ship appears in his garden which surprises him and draws him away from his purpose to the point that he summons Morpheus angrily, commands him to take the ship away. Destiny, like all his siblings, is capable of feeling emotions, but he takes his duty a lot more seriously than any of them, which is why he's seen the least and perceived as being the coldest. Adrian Lester does a great job of capturing the gravitas of this character, but we have to admit that him not having Destiny's trademark clouded eyes does take a sliver away from the character. Death. Can't say the same for this gal though, because if we're being honest, Sandman's death is the Grim Reaper we all deserve. Not just because she's a cute little goth girl in the novels, or because she's played by the insanely versatile Kirby, it's because Sandman's version of death is who we'd want to see if our time came to leave this messy place. In her early years, Death of the Endless was a lot like every other death god we encounter in fiction, cold, distant, and brittle as rusted iron. She believed that her job was a lot harder than the rest of her siblings because, well, she's death. She was there when the first living being came into existence, and she'll be there when the last living being dies, along with the universe. In her own words, when that happens, she'll put up the chairs on the tables, turn off the lights, and lock the universe behind her. But that kind of a description about her final act didn't come to her naturally. It was only after Death got a taste of mortal life that she realized mortals weren't a curse meant to haunt her psyche, they were a gift. to be celebrated for the lives they did live. And so, Death of the Endless endeavored to celebrate the lives of those whose souls she collected when their time came, because she knows now that the act of passing is made kinder, friend is nearby. Death, both in the comics and the TV show, chooses to wear informal clothes and behave in an informal way because she knows that the rigors of office are not a burden to bear. In fact, she's probably the only member of the eldest Endless who doesn't view her job with undue seriousness. Once every century, Death spends a day as a mortal, and that day gives her all the perspective and release she requires from the morbidity of her universal purpose. As a result, she acts as her younger sibling's mother and big sister, as and when required. Her relationship with Dream in particular is touching because in many ways, Death is the reason Dream ends up becoming more human, and he's always thankful for his elder sister's guidance whenever he requires it. Death's realm is called the Sunless Land, and in the graphic novels, we never quite get to see it in all its glory, but in the Netflix show, it's this chic apartment with all sorts of gizmos from across time. When Orpheus visits her to ask for her help in saving Eurydice, he finds a gramophone playing a vinyl record, which is really odd to him considering he's from ancient Greece. But that's just the kind of eccentric Death is in this series. She helps her brother become friends with Hob Gadling because she feels like he needs one, and when Dream is in the dumps after acquiring his tools again, she shows him how their job can bring them as much joy as it can pain. She also calls him out for abandoning Nada in hell, and she's the family's residential caller-outer. Despair, Desire, Delirium, they've all been subject to one of Death's patented Big Sis lectures, and though they don't love her as much as their older brother, they do all respect her. That's the kind of death god we want to visit us when we die, and according to the creators of Sandman, Death of the Endless is the ultimate representation of death. So we're just hoping to skip over Necron when our time comes, because that guy blows. Dream! The third Endless, and the one around whom this entire franchise is based, Dream is, as you might have guessed, the very concept of dreaming. Born at the moment where living beings became capable of dreaming, Dream's purpose in the universe is to ensure that things stay that way. He believes that humans aren't humans despite their dreams, they're humans because of them, and he takes his duties as seriously as destiny, at least at the beginning. Dream is a man who has intense emotions and reactions to things he doesn't deem appropriate. He is often misunderstood by his siblings because his personality is so domineering that they can't stand his assertions. Dream is the king and lord of the dreaming, a space that forms and deforms and forms again based on sentient life's dreams and his own. When Dream is feeling good about something, the dreaming shines with the sun of the spring. When he's in a foul mood, it rains in the dreaming, much like that one time Earth experienced rain for millions of years. As the king of dreams, his job is to create new dreams and nightmares to send into the sleeping psyches of living beings, because in this universe, good and bad bring balance together, not despite one another. And it's that kind of power that makes him a target for many within the universe, both mortal and immortal. We won't get into Dream's journey too deeply because, well, you're seeing it unfold firsthand. But what we will say about him is that he's perhaps the Endless that makes the most progress towards humanization in the entire Sandman franchise. Dream begins the series with a deep hatred for mortal life, which is understandable considering he gets trapped and robbed by a mortal. The show intensifies these feelings by extending his imprisonment to over a century as opposed to the 70 years of the graphic novels. But through his experiences with recovering his tools and dealing with escaped nightmares and dreams, Morpheus grows so much that even his siblings don't recognize him anymore. Of course, Death is happy for him because she had always wished he got a true taste of what makes mortals special. Morpheus has had relationships with a few of them, but he always defaulted to his duty as an Endless before thinking about his duties as a lover, a husband, and even a father. Yet, following his imprisonment, when he discovered that many of his creations had deserted him as opposed to looking for him, he became curious why that was, and came to realize many things about his own mental constitution. Throughout Sandman, we see Dream becoming less concerned with fulfilling his cosmic duties and more concerned with fulfilling his familial role. He doesn't do this at the expense of being the king of dreams. Rather, he learns how to rely on those he's created or acquired, truly understanding the meaning of love and support. He starts apologizing to people, even his own creations, which both gladdens and shocks them because Dream never did any of that before. And by the time the series ends, Dream shows the rest of the Endless that even a heartless bastard like him can lay down his life for the greater good when the time calls for it. Sandman isn't the journey of a god and how it affects mankind. It's the journey of a god who discovers what it's like to be part of mankind and shifts his perspective from overbearing to to over-caring. Destruction! The fourth sibling of the Endless is one that's also missing from the series when it begins, because Destruction is perhaps the most self-aware, self-loathing Endless there is. As his name suggests, Destruction is the personification of that great and chaotic agent of change. His domain, called the Fulcrum, is a wasteland that's always in the middle of getting completely destroyed. When you enter the Fulcrum, you may be assaulted by gigantic sandstorms, the likes of which even Arrakis doesn't experience. Or you might get pulled into its core, which is always in the middle of exploding. Destruction's sigil is the sword, not because it kills, but because it destroys more than one life when used. But if you asked him personally if that's what he believes his cosmic role is, he would disagree. Creation is the base setting of the game of life, then destruction is how you level up and evolve. And Destruction himself doesn't like this one bit, because his cosmic role goes against his personal beliefs. If it were up to him, he'd call himself creation or preservation, because that's what he truly values. Destruction is not like Death when it comes to doing his job. Where Death found a new understanding of her role after spending time with mortals and endeavored to fulfill every aspect of it as gracefully as she could, Destruction did the bang opposite and abandoned his post. He did this when humanity entered the Age of Reason because, as the personification of destruction, he knew where that reason would lead them. Destruction foresaw the creation of the atomic bomb and nuclear weapons, and realized that these weapons that alter the fundamental laws of the universe will be attributed to him, as was everything that predated it, and he was unwilling to take the burden of the deaths it would cause upon his own head. Ironically enough, Destruction was the most peaceful of his siblings, and he often played peacemaker during family meetings because that's what he truly values. His younger sisters adore him and depend on him, except maybe Desire, but his older siblings view him with confusion or outright contempt for abandoning his post. Like we saw in Season 2, Part 1, Destruction took up all kinds of artistic mediums of expression because he wanted to get into a mortal skin, and not in the way Lucifer's demons do. When he departs his place of hiding, his aim is not to abandon everything and return to the endless dark, because Fulcrum still exists. All he wants to do is stop taking the responsibility of destruction because he's realized that it'll continue whether he directs it or not, and directing the annihilation of entire civilizations is more painful to him than letting it all happen naturally, because then he becomes responsible for it. In many ways, Destruction is the first Endless to truly understand that he exists despite mortals, not because of them or for them, because even nature destroys itself after reaching a critical point. Asteroids collide with planets, natural calamities tear apart cities, the death of a star, and the destruction of everything around it. These are events that don't require mortal intervention, yet they occur and are attributed to destruction. So, his quitting is a profound commentary on how things always get out of hand, and then the ones who embrace responsibility are the ones left to clean up others' mistakes. In fact, he probably realized how screwed up his cosmic role was when he helped Orpheus reach death so he could then travel into the underworld, because all he was trying to do was help his beloved nephew, and all he managed to do was destroy the rest of his life.
Can I get you anything you desire?
Desire. The fifth Endless, and the first to delight in interfering with mortal affairs, Desire can be thought of as the main antagonist of the Sandman. An androgynous being whose gender is completely reliant upon their own whims, Desire is the very concept of desire given form, which is reflected best in the realm they inhabit. Desire's domain is called the Threshold. This is symbolic of both the concept of desire and desire themselves. Desire is never a definite thing. It's always found on the threshold of two opposing forces: hot and cool, good and evil, love and hate. It's that moment where all things are implied and yet none of them are concrete, and this lines up rather well with the form of the threshold. The threshold is nothing more than an endless landscape with only one thing and one being populating it. The first is a massive, almost living personification of desire themselves. This statue extends into the heavens and is the only structure within the threshold, and inside its heart is where desire of the endless resides, indicating the deeply personal and alien concept of that emotion. Desire is never consistent between two people. They may think they work for the same cause or are in a relationship for the same reasons, but every individual's desire is different, which means that in the end, their desires are theirs alone. This is reflected perfectly by the Threshold, which, in the graphic novels, was a much darker and more sinister landscape. The Netflix series turned on the lights and gave the Threshold Desire's quote-unquote light form because the other option was way too dark, literally, but it preserved their manipulative spirit. That's because desire is inherently tied to mortals and their emotions, and so they can't help themselves but meddle with their lives. The eldest Endless see interacting with humanity as a great taboo. They're created to serve mortals, not fraternize and become intimate with them. Yes, Dream and Destruction have had relationships with mortals in the past, but Death and Destiny have because their cosmic roles are too burdensome to make such a thing possible. In fact, Dream used to think of Desire as their favorite sibling because they were the one who introduced Dream to his first great love. Her name was Kilala, and she was the being whose life formed the future Green Lantern Corps. An ancestor of the Malthusians, Kilala had the unique power to create constructs with the power of her mind using a force called the Glow. It was this similarity in their aspects of existence that drew Dream to her. Back then, he could differentiate desire from love and believed that his desire from Kilala came from his sibling. So, at a family meeting, he thanked Desire for this protective, all-consuming bubble that was Kilala. But Desire didn't appreciate being labeled matchmaker one single bit, and so they decided that from that point onward, they would make Morpheus's misery their personal project. They manipulated Kilala into falling for the personified aspect of the son of the planet Oa, and when Dream realized what had happened, Desire went from being his favorite sibling to the one he hates the most. Desire has manipulated Dream's relationships ever since, with Nada being one of their failures and Rose Walker being one of their near successes. Their aim in life is to bring down the rigidity and coldness of certainty that Dream walks with because that negates the very concept of desire, which is fluid, fiery, and ever so spontaneous. And because Sandman is a series about the Sandman, Desire's constant meddling in his life makes them the Sandman's only proper nemesis and the true antagonist of the series. But Desire has another thing that makes them unique, and that's the fact that they're the only Endless member who came into existence with another. Despair. If desire represents the vortex of emotions within which all are present yet none are defined, then despair is the result of that vortex in a way. Because when most people are released by the grip of their desires, all they're left with is despair, seeing as desire doesn't discriminate between what's good and what's not. Even arsonists and pedophiles can be touched by their embrace, because in the end, they're extreme manifestations of baser human desires. We want to clarify that we're not supporting any such thing, we're just pointing out that when it comes to the aspect of desire, such folks embrace that kind of barbarism as if it's their God-given right, and in many ways they're not wrong. But like we saw in Sandman Season 1, when Morpheus made an entire convention of serial killers confront their childish desires, all of them gave in to despair almost immediately. This is why desire and despair choose to toy with mortals the way they do, because to them, these are the kernels that create dreams in the first place. Unlike desire, though, despair has a certain threshold for mischief. Perhaps that's because despair has died once already. This hasn't been mentioned in the show so far, so we don't know if it's true for the show Despair, but in the graphic novels, Despair was the first Endless to truly die. The reasons behind her demise are unknown, but the Endless have stated that it wasn't weightless, and that the murderer had been cursed with immortality for their crime. The Despair we see in Netflix's Sandman is supposed to be the second one, and she's very different from her predecessor. The first Despair was a lot like Desire, talkative, confident, covered in tattoos. She was the one who instigated the destruction of Krypton and left Superman alive because to her, his survival was the most perfect piece of art. After her death, she's replaced by the current version, who's a lot more hideous in her artistic version. Despair lives in the Grey Realm, which is populated by two things apart from herself: rats and mirrors. She uses her mirrors to look at humans who are on the brink of despair and to determine whether they'll give in to it or not. In case you're wondering, usually they do. Despair's outlook on life can be called bleak, and she has no loyalty towards anything that isn't connected to her importance in the cosmic totem pole. But she does love two people unconditionally: Destruction, the elder brother who always made her feel nice about herself despite her cosmic function, and Desire, her twin. In fact, Despair and Desire are probably the Endless who interact with each other the most, because in many ways, their functions are intertwined. Oftentimes, the outcome of desire is despair, and it's not uncommon for humans to use desire to escape despair. Though Despair has died once, she doesn't plan on it happening again, which is probably why she agrees to go along with Desire's plan for Morpheus. But even Despair knows when to accept defeat, and she admitted her elder brother's superiority a long time ago, when he proved that even a man like Joshua Norton, who was on the brink of unimaginable despair, can be saved by the blessings of a dream. This is why Despair takes no part in the events of Season 2, where Desire operates in a solo capacity. She's had her fun time with Morpheus, and she now endeavors to do what she does best: send despicable and delightful humans into that gaping abyssal pit of hopelessness.
Hi, it's me.
Delirium, formerly Delight. The final member of the Endless and the youngest, Delirium wasn't always called Delirium. In fact, she came into this world as Delight, the ethereal manifestation of all things that brought immense pleasure and joy to mortals' hearts. No one knows exactly when or why Delight turned into Delirium, but we think we can hazard a guess. When the supreme consciousness of mortals started considering things like murder and rape to be as delightful as the morning sun breaking over a cold land, how else was she supposed to adapt? At the beginning of her existence, mortals' understanding of themselves was in a state of flux, but not an uncontrollable flux. Delight was purer in those days, and it was only when mortal lives became so complicated that they became disdainful that Delight turned into Delirium. In a way, Delirium retains aspects of her former identity because she still acts much like a cheerful young girl. But because what brings delight to mortals is now ever-changing, so is Delirium's behavior and appearance. Delirium's look is usually that of a young woman, but her cosmetics keep changing, save for her heterochromatic eyes. Her appearance reflects the ever-changing delights of a mortal, which, without discipline, leads to a single natural conclusion. And that conclusion shares its name with Delirium's realm, where it is called madness. In fact, Delirium can make her eyes monochromatic, giving them the appearance of having the same color, but the effort to be disciplined takes such a toll on her that she experiences physical pain if she keeps it up for too long. A lack of discipline was the death of Delight, caused the birth of Delirium, which is evident in every panel and scene she appears in. Still, that doesn't mean that she's useless or has any less sway over mortal life in comparison to her siblings. In fact, Delirium might be the sanest of them all because she embodies all aspects of Delirium, which includes sanity. She has a rambling, incoherent manner of speaking, except when you look at whatever she says, it makes perfect sense in its own way. And Delirium's assertion that there are things in the vast multitude of existence that are not recorded in Destiny's little book is also true, because mortals have figured out a way to go against the lives that were planned for them from the moment of inception. Delirium herself is a part of this assertion because her transformation from Delight wasn't something Destiny anticipated and is therefore out of his scope of perception. Delirium looks at all her eldest siblings for support and anchorage because her very nature causes her to fly off the handle more often than not. Before his departure, destruction filled that role in her life, so when she asked Morpheus to go search for him with her, she wasn't just looking for her stability, she was also looking for a replacement for destruction. Delirium's instability is reflected in madness, which is a realm so chaotic it has no proper form and no means of navigation. The only way to find Delirium within it is to focus on Delirium herself, which was evidenced in the Season 2 Part 1 episode where Dream visits his sister to apologize. He enters her realm through a rather frantically proceeding train, which at first appears to be empty. Then it conjures a few passengers who disdain Dream's presence before showing him an orgy that was also a rave. Within this setting, he sees his former lover, Nada, and nearly gives in to his mental image of, but when he realizes this would make him lose his sister's location, he moves past it and arrives at Delirium's palace. This place is a decrepit manor surrounded by all kinds of queer buildings covered in overgrowth, and it has a broken sundial representing Delirium's own fragility. After Morpheus spends time with her, this fragility seems to fade away a bit, and before leaving for good, Destruction gifts his talking dog companion Barnabas to his favorite sister because he knows she needs anchorage. In many ways, Delirium is the most human of all the Endless because she represents human confusion about the state of doing and being, and that makes her the most important of them all, despite her young age and the Elder Endless's beliefs. Without Delirium, humanity would live predictable, boring, and orderly lives within their own neat little boxes. And magic and madness are two sides of the same coin, neither can exist without the other. Marvelous verdict! And with that, we've come to the end of this video about the Endless. We hope we did a decent job of explaining each of their aspects and reasons for existing, because they all deserve 30-minute videos of their own, and even that might not be enough. But that's enough of our talking. We want to hear what you guys think about the Endless, so let us know in the comments section down below. Don't forget to like this video and share it with your fellow surrealist literature enthusiasts, and subscribe to Marvelous Videos because we'll be breaking down Sandman most of July. We'll see you guys real soon with more Endless content, so stay safe, stay tuned, and if you meet any golden-eyed people trying to seduce you, do the opposite of what happened to Delirium. Develop discipline and run away.